What's something people do because they think it makes them look smart, but it actually makes them look really dumb? Astronomer here. We get a lot of spam mails in my line of work from random guys promoting their pet theories who will just email everyone in the department with their ideas. Sometimes we still get it via snail mail, but not as much lately. Most are the sort where their theory wouldn't work if they took more than first year undergrad physics. And the second most popular are, I have this idea, but can you do the physics for me? Invitations to collaborate. Most people glance over them just in case there's something interesting, and it takes a few minutes sometimes to realize it's a ridiculous email, but rarely, if ever, respond because these guys are often not all there with their mental health. Anyway, there is one way I can always immediately spot one. A huge fraction of these emails will open with the letter form of Dear Mr. Name. Now, first off, it seems weird to assume Mr. in astronomy departments where everyone has a doctorate. Second, I'm a woman, as are close to half the people in my department, and we have pictures on the department website where the contact info is. So, way to go through all that effort to get the astronomer to get your theory, but indicate that you did 0% research on who you're writing to. I still respond to people. I advise maybe 100 people a year for career advice on Reddit, for example, but I don't engage with people who sound potentially mentally disturbed and clearly know where I work. I doubt many women do. I know, right? It's like they're trying to solve the universe's biggest mysteries but can't figure out basic email etiquette. Story 3. 1. Correct everyone's spelling and grammar like an English teacher. 2. Commenting on, sharing Facebook posts that say something like, only smart people understand this, or only 1% of the population can get this right. No, screw you. 3. Bragging about not being into certain mainstream things because you are too smart for that kind of stuff. 4. Bragging about what books you're reading and how much you're reading. Like, if the book is good, please feel free to share, or if you're looking for something to read, ask for recommendations. Hell, even quote passages if you want. But bragging about how you're reading Tolstoy, Shakespeare, etc. is just annoying. 5. Always posting about your grades, tests, and other school-related stuff. Like, if you finish a semester with an amazing GPA, graduated, or writing a paper where you need input from others, then that's cool, post away. But I seriously do not need to know you got an A on every test or that your teacher thinks you're the best thing since sliced bread. 6. Being closed-minded rather than considering evidence from both sides. People, especially adults, should be able to have a mature conversation and form their opinions based on facts rather than just feeling. Too many full-grown adults throw temper tantrums when someone disagrees with them. 7. Talk over someone they're having a conversation with. I have a coworker who will ask you a question and then talk over you really loud while you reply until you stop talking so she can continue talking. You can't tell her anything because she thinks she knows everything. 8. When someone says something and someone else in the conversation agrees and just restated what the other person said to make it seem like they know what they're talking about. 9. Act like they know way more than they actually do. Like, if someone asks you a question and you just respond with words that you don't even understand in an attempt to act smart, if the person knows about the subject, they most likely know that you're just full of crap and will call you out on it. Just don't act like you know everything. It doesn't make you look better, nor does it make people even like you. It just makes you look stupid. 10. Saying, what? You've never heard of or done this before? Implying that they are smarter or somehow better than you for knowing something obscure. 11. Over-explaining something. Someone may start out with a good thought and then ruin it by getting too in-depth and trying to extrapolate on that thought to make it look more shiny. 12. Use unnecessarily large words in day-to-day conversation. Thesaurus talk makes it obvious you're trying to sound smart, and if they can tell you're trying, they see the opposite, just like when people try to look cool. 13. Posting on my local news Facebook comment sections. I don't care if I agree with them at this point. Everyone who has any reasonable intelligence level knows it's a dumpster fire unless you're posting a congrats on a feel-good story about a local youth getting a scholarship or something. I'm going to assume you are an idiot. 14. Make some kind of obscure reference during conversation. Wait a beat to gauge reaction. Say something like, do you know what I was just talking about? And then proceed to triumphantly explain some said obscure reference to the other person with a noticeable tinge of, wow, I can't believe you didn't know that. Story 4. The big one that I see all the time on Reddit is when somebody points out a coincidence in a movie or book, calls it a reference, and then acts like they're a genius for figuring out some big plot subversion. For example, in the raft scene in Castaway, Tom Hanks calls out Wilson's name several times, but he doesn't come back. This is a reference to Beetlejuice, where Beetlejuice comes if you say his name 3 times. Wilson doesn't come back because the directors wanted to show that Castaway is a more serious movie than Beetlejuice. But they're fine, that's not the stupid. I mean, it's stupid, but whatever. The stupid is the entire comment section being hundreds of idiots saying, "You don't already know this?" Or, "I wondered who else noticed this, ha ha ha." When the entire thing is a ludicrously tenuous farce that's also coupled with extreme obscurity. People are so eager to hide the idea that they didn't pick up on something first that they latch on to something stupid with total dedication. Also, would you like to go to the shops with Bob and I? You don't go to the shops with I, you go with me. Story 5. Using buzzwords when talking about something they know little or nothing about. I do tech work for fire alarm panels, and I had a coworker that managed the accounts but knew nothing about the tech side. That's fine, it's not her job to know the tech. But she didn't like to admit it and would call and try to ask me questions using a bunch of industry-related words she'd heard me use but didn't understand. And it would just be a mishmash of incomprehensible gibberish. To give you an idea, imagine it's a pizza shop and a customer calls to complain about a cold pizza. She calls me up since I made the pizza and says, "Hey, the customer said their pizza was cold. Do you think the mozzarella might have caused the oven to crust over from anchovies being topped from the Parmesan bell peppers with olives being cut?" She would then often degenerate to just random words and abbreviations. I don't remember any exact quotes, but using my actual industry terms, something like, "They say they've got no reply from a pull station. Do you think that somehow the strobe card might be causing a NAC to cut out the main panel network Desigo tamper battery XLS sprinkler?" It was painful. I'd usually just say something like, "Not sure. I'll be able to tell more when I get there." Story 6. Pretend to be informed about and insist on having an opinion about anything and everything. Above all, a total refusal to ever employ the expressions, "I don't know," or "Please explain." This instantly marks you out as an essentially uneducated person. Well-educated people know, above all else, what they do not know, and they have no compunction whatever about admitting what they don't know, implicitly because they know that an admission of ignorance is the surest way to remedy it, and have confidence that they can understand and learn about basically anything, given time. Know-it-alls are almost invariably covering up for their own intellectual insecurities while effectively putting them on full display. Yeah, it's a shame they can't just say, "I don't know. It's not a crime, you know." Story 7. Asking pointless questions in lectures. My favorites are, "Teacher, please notice I read this book or article not on the syllabus but kind of relevant to the class questions," especially since most of the time the professor doesn't have much of a response beyond acknowledging the connection. I took a year-long intensive business program, and this one kiss bum managed to bring up a book that was mentioned during orientation in just about every class the whole year. Also, this reminds me of a guy from one of my college history classes. On any subject, he would always throw out a question that was clearly intended to make it sound like he was already familiar with the topic at hand, but just wanted an extra tidbit of info. It was very transparent, and he fell flat on his face one day when he tried it on something he didn't catch at all. The professor was talking about something and said, in the words of Lennon-McCartney, insert Beatles song quote here, Mr. I am very smart apparently thought the professor meant Lennon-McCartney and just asked, out of curiosity, did McCartney ever admit to being a communist? Professor just stared at him for like 3 seconds of awkward silence and then moved on like he hadn't spoken. Story 8. My patients who Google their symptoms before they come in with a differential list that is much different from the one that develops in my mind as we discuss their symptoms. I've had people present to the front desk saying, it's either a heart attack or a clot, when in reality it's an upper respiratory infection. I have appendicitis or a bowel perforation, when actually it's just a UTI. I'm happy that people seek answers online and critically think, but please don't get yourself all bothered until you speak with a professional. I know sometimes we get it wrong, so definitely get that second opinion if you need it. All the knowledge in the world is available online. The proper application of that knowledge is why I got all that extra education. Story 9. Being music elitists, or film, or book, or whatever media. I guess we all automatically judge people based on their musical preferences, and there is a strong correlation between your socio-cultural background and preferences. But it's plain dumb to write a mental biography of someone based only on their musical choice or absolutely reject whole musical styles. I've noticed this mainly in rockers and metalheads where I live. It's not uncommon for them to assume people are uncultured just because they listen to pop music and they don't know the name of any rock bands. I used to be an insufferable rock enthusiast that hated and avoided all sorts of other styles, but all teens are dumb. When an adult still behaves with this small tribe mentality, it's cringy. It signals immaturity and inflexibility, not intelligence. Story 10. Those Redditors complaining about reposts. I'm all aboard for being mad at people that are claiming OC and stealing, but it's pretty obvious when a repost isn't done on purpose. Like, get over it. I've been here a considerably long time, and people crying about reposts are worse than the repost itself. It's like y'all get off on calling out reposts just so you can let everyone else know that you've seen it already. Let the bots do their work to let the OP know, and just don't give it any attention, and I promise all you repost haters that the post will disappear. Reposts will never stop, so why pay too much mind to them? Karma isn't real, so why do you care if the person posting it gets a little something? It's funny how mad people will get over content that they don't even own or have seen already. Are you not entertained? You know what I'm saying? Story 11. A lot of my students, community college, act shocked when they fail the first midterm and tell me, but I got a B in high school, like I've made some sort of mistake. They're trying to convince me that they're really smart, and while this doesn't make them look dumb, I do feel really bad for them. Public education in our state is a joke, third worst in the country, and there are tons of kids getting passed along each year who absolutely should be held back. Getting a B in high school here is not an accomplishment at all. Now, I've got college students who can't divide 2,500 by 500 telling me they're good at math and I don't know what to tell them. I can't say, no, you're not, you're struggling with fifth grade division. I do my best to help them and I offer extra meetings outside of class, but I am not going to slap a B on their work to pass them along. That's how we got this problem in the first place. Story 12. Not sure how many of you deal with the one-uppers, but they drive me batty. They always have something more clever, funny, interesting, outlandish to say with relation to whatever topic you're talking about to sound smarter or more worldly or better than you or worse off than you. Basically, whatever will get them the most attention. Most of the time, whatever they are saying is a lie or a heavy embellishment of the truth. For example, P1, I really liked my drive to Manitoba last week. I saw a moose. It was... P2 cuts in with, we see moose all the time on our drive. What way do you go? We like to take the blah, 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 blah because we see tons of moose every time. I can't believe you've only seen one. That reminds me of this other time that... Also, bragging about following an ideology just because you can be conservative, liberal, progressive, or whatever group you want to identify with doesn't mean you actually understand how the real world works. I have nothing wrong with someone being one of the above, but when people act like being a member of an ideology makes them smart, it really just means they can follow a label. Story 13. Being incredibly disagreeable and constantly correcting people. You see it a ton in Reddit comments, just a bunch of people arguing because it feels good, doing it to look better or whatever. It looks pathetic, and they end up overtalking themselves to the point you realize they aren't all that knowledgeable on whatever they're talking about. It's fine to admit you don't know everything. All the smartest people I know are always going on about what they don't know and what they want to learn. I see so many people on Reddit acting like you're obligated to have thoughts on topics you aren't knowledgeable in. I think it's fine if you accept you aren't the best at understanding one topic and choose to not take part in it. I know, right? It's like they're trying to win an argument they haven't even started yet. Story 14. Restate or rephrase what others say so that they are the last person speaking and look like they are the ones making decisions. Me? Okay, so it looks like you'll spend a couple days investigating the bug and let me know what it takes to resolve it, while I'll inform the user group how they can work around it. Colleague. Right, you'll inform the user group how to get the data for now while we figure out what's wrong in the code and circle back together on Thursday. My brain. Which, that's what I just said, but you feel like you need to look like the big boss around here. That's on you, I guess. Story 15. Little kids saying that they can do something, but when you ask them to do it, they say they don't want to right now. Or when you ask them to explain something they claim to understand, but they just don't. Or when they get angry because they want to sleep on the left side of the bed, but the other kid wants to sleep there for whatever reason. And we ask them why, and they don't talk because they just want to make their sister angry and have no reason for sleeping on that side, even though the cousin that they were both wanting to sleep next to is going to sleep sideways at the end of the bed because I'm supposed to be the nice one. And now they're both upset and everyone's throwing a fit and sorry, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, sorry, I just went on about my cousin being a schmuck to everyone. She thinks she's smart, but she's really a schmuck, or how she would put it to her 5-year-old sister that just wants her blankie back, an ugly face and a baby. Okay, I'm really done now. Story 16. Explain something when you haven't asked for it. I work in a bookstore, and the amount of people that come looking for a certain book and then say 20 plus minutes later, explaining that they have X number of diplomas in that field and that they know a lot about a ton of topics, and expect me to know and recognize the names of the authors that they love, which happen to be of a very specific genre, is insane. I get at least 2 of those every day. Just don't misuse your knowledge. The employee doesn't really want to hear the story of your life if they don't prompt you to it, and most definitely won't give you priority over other customers that also want me to search books for them. Story 17. Bulking out sentences with big extra words that aren't required. You're compensating for something, and it is a lot easier to simply get down to a very simple point in a concise fashion without all that nonsense. For example, she engaged him in conversation as to advise him on the terms of the proposed agreement. In short, she told him what the new agreement's terms would be. He was informed by those present that the failure to remove his vehicle from the restricted area would result in his vehicle being lawfully removed and impounded subject to payment of a release fee. Or they told him that if he didn't move his car, it would get towed and he'd have to pay to get it back. It would be respectfully requested if you were to be so kind as to adhere to the terms and conditions, or else our agreement shall be null and void and your rights cannot be guaranteed. Or, please keep to our terms and conditions. If not, this agreement will be ended and you have no rights. Failure to operate the equipment in the prescribed manner will result in considerable discomfort, and no compensation shall be offered for injuries resulting from a use of the equipment which is considered incorrect. Or, make sure you use the equipment as shown in the instructions or you risk injury. No compensation is available for injuries caused through misuse. There was a court case in the UK where a background sentencing report was full of this sort of thing, and the judge was ranting and raving about the needlessly complicated way it laid out very simple stuff. Story 18. Interrupting to add a personal anecdote just because they think it's related but adds nothing to the conversation. It just interrupts it. They say it to try and be impressive, but they come across kind of arrogant and untrustworthy, instead causing half the comments they make sound like BS. For example, we have a girl in my course at the moment who's apparently seen almost everything that's super rare in my industry. She seemed to have worked in a lab with large animals, small animals, and normal clinics without being qualified. Even if so, she would have only been in industry for less than a year or 2 at most, but unqualified? Actually, it isn't possible. Sure, random chick, not like all of our supervisors who have been in the industry for over 20 years, has only ever seen one of these things once, and you've seen all of these things. Example of class today. Here's something that I learned in class that I found hilarious. Certain medicines, when used with geldings and stallions, certain male horses, can cause a prolapse. This girl responds to this, "Oh yeah, we had a horse at the clinic I worked at that had that." Everyone, okay, and? This was like the 8th time she had done this, and her claims got more and more outlandish. Ha ha ha. Also, she would never say where she worked at. Story 19. I've seen it here already, but using big words. Someone in my class uses the chemical name for medicines. Instead of just the medical name or the brand name like acetaminophen instead of paracetamol or Tylenol, they use it in the right context, but since there's literally no need for it, P much convinced they do it to come across as smart. Like if someone says, "I need to grab some painkillers. What do you use?" Tylenol. "Oh, acetaminophen." Another thing is putting down others. Another thing I've seen, i.e. playing on their mistakes or making them out to be generally dumb. "You know this and that." "Oh, of course you don't. You're you." I suppose these things make them look less dumb and more like a schmuck. Story 20. My boss does 2 things that make me want to end her a little, a lot. She talks to herself all the time. I'm talking full-on conversations at full volume. She probably read somewhere that it shows signs of increased intelligence or some dumb things like that. That's the kind of person she is. When answering someone during a conversation, she likes to start her response with, "What I hear you saying is." She learned that in some leadership training class and she thinks it's the greatest. It might not sound that bad, but it can really make you want to put a weapon in your mouth after you've heard it say it like 15 times in one day. Story 21. Judge you for having the audacity to ask a question about something you didn't know about, but are smart enough to admit you didn't know something and wish to know more about the subject instead of pretending that you knew something of which you know nothing, especially when it is over subjects that are hardly common knowledge. For instance, you are a newly hired network engineer and you ask a question about the network you just got hired to work on, operates, and one of the more senior guys repeats your question in a mocking, "Wow, you are stupid for asking a question about this network which is very specialized and not taught about in school" kind of tone. Then they begrudgingly reveal the answer without giving enough information so as to bait you into asking another question so they can be more of a schmuck. The best part is when they start to brag about how much of an expert they are and how the company sees them as an invaluable asset, just for them to find out a week later that he had been training his replacement. The person they had been berating and acted so superior to overcame and took their job. Karma. And if you're enjoying the video so far, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 22. Ascribing to sovereign citizen ideologies and the various similar ideologies that have no basis in law. A lot of the positions I have heard, I see sovereign citizens in court regularly, start from a mistaken but at least somewhat rational premise. For example, a criminal defendant in one case has to have her case dismissed because she has the right to confront her accuser, and, quote, the state of Nevada isn't in court. The judge pointed to the prosecutor and said, well, there's your state of Nevada, motion denied. Note that she actually invoked the Constitution as part of her larger argument, not represented here, that the Constitution doesn't apply to her. The folks I see cherry pick what laws they think apply to them apparently based on whether they like the law or not. Taxes? Your laws are fake. Roads and government-issued currency? No problem. Story 23. I can list a few, using the format person X and I when they're the object of the sentence and not the subject. Maybe it doesn't make people look really dumb, but it's definitely something that sticks out to me most when I see someone who's a lawyer or works at a college, or otherwise should probably know better, do it. It's a small thing, but it's an easy rule that people go the wrong way on pretty regularly. Incorrect use of whom and myself are jarring. I do an internal eye roll every time. Honestly, I feel like using who or me when you should have used the other word sounds more normal, but there are those whom will disagree with myself. People who bring up facts and research when it's not even relevant to the topic. This dude and I were talking about our opinions on marriage, and I said, even though marriage has its issues, I think that if you find the right person, it's worth it. And this dude goes like, according to research on divorced couples, finding the right person and thinking that it's worth it does not contribute to a healthy marriage. Talking in high-level meetings as a relatively junior member of the group just to talk without adding anything. Explaining to experts how they are experts in work. Ignoring people trying to get you to shut up and move on and continuing to ask the same questions that were dunked on. Realizing in the last 5 minutes of talking to a group of people your point was completely wrong and continuing to talk about buzzwords and not say anything. One question what the hell you're talking about and then start talking about something unrelated. People who try to back up an opinion using a celebrity despite the fact the celebrity they are citing has a career and a life that has absolutely nothing to do with the thing they're talking about. Well, I'll have you know that Oprah doesn't like heavy metal music. Who the hell cares? Using a ton of quotes, I've seen people try to carry arguments without including a single thought form in their own mind, constantly quoting from person X and book Y and so on. Take them off script, ask a question from a different perspective, and they'll just try to steer the discussion to the confines of what they have read or listened to or moved on to a new quote. People who do something wrong but find an excuse to justify why they do it wrong, but it is still right. Who are you lying to? Yourself? Imagine someone trying to throw a ball, but they look like a one-legged cat trying to bury something on a frozen lake. You explain this to them and tell them some basic fundamentals of throwing a ball, but they just come up with excuses and refuse to do it any other way but their way because there is no way they can be wrong. People who are constantly in a state of condescension and scoff at everything anyone says as if it's the dumbest thing in the world. These types of people literally get excited the second you say anything they can somewhat correct. Also, people who constantly chime in with unfunny jokes and overly specific references and are often the only one laughing. They like to say people don't get their humor. And yes, I'm aware of the irony of this post. Story 24. I've got a good one. Here in Spain, if anyone hears but a word about you being foreign, or you say something in a strange accent, they will immediately start asking Inglés or Spanish. Seriously, they know like 2 or 3 words in English in a horrible, pathetic accent, but they will not stop. Drives me insane, especially a year after coming here where I have already learned quite a bit of Spanish. On the other hand, I've not had very friendly experiences with them. Story 25. Speaking really fast about complex issues and then saying, never mind, you wouldn't understand. I was inspecting an apartment building one time and one of the tenants kept comparing things to ancient wars, rambling off names of generals and locations in Mesopotamia, but talking so fast he was blurring all his words together. If you didn't instantly agree with him, he just said you wouldn't understand. He went on to tell me how great his business renting carpets for events was, and that was obvious given that he was living in Section 8 housing with milk crates as tables. Story 26. When they use basic biology and their only two genders argument, like, damn, dude, all that research and you missed how 1% of the world's population falls outside XX and XY? On top of that, there's historical evidence of different cultures recognizing more than two genders, especially in island areas where intergender people are more common. Also, people who inject scientific facts about why fictional things aren't possible. I had a DM that brought up how radiation glows blue instead of green every chance he got. Once we were all having a fun conversation about when Green Arrow put a boxing glove on an arrow and it became the DM's duty to explain why that wouldn't work. Story 27. When intoxicated, adopt an owlish and sagely look on your face and proceed to educate everyone in the gathering on the fundamental differences between genders and why clearly defined home and workplace roles according to those is how society is meant to function. It's a guaranteed crowd pleaser with your friends, wives, and girlfriends. If you really want to spice it up, talk about man equals warrior and protector of the realm. Use examples like pack leader from the animal kingdom to back up your case when their wives argue. Bonus points if there's a history nerd among them and you mention the merits of paterfamilias. Phrases like, you're meant by nature to be nurturers, also help. Story 28. I'm learning to drive, and given my strong anxiety, I struggle, but I honestly want to drive well. And the amount of people that have said to me, yeah, girls have less interest in cars and driving, so they struggle much more, are far too many. My mom is a great driver, and she couldn't care less about cars. Also, we hadn't had a car for more than 10 years. Public transport has done the job, so I haven't been able to pay attention prior to the lessons. Like, what's even the point of that comment? Should I feel bad? Should I apologize? Honestly, those comments that bring nothing are the worst. I prefer silence over it. Story 29. I'm not sure if this counts as smart, but I see too many internet tough guys who brag about how alpha, cool, superhuman they are. For example, if a weak character in a manga happens to make a mistake or get into an embarrassing situation, these guys would be throwing insults at him or her, saying how they'd have done X or Y and be done with it. Yeah, God forbid someone to be weak or make mistakes in fiction. MC, I'm not sure how to confess my feelings. I feel so unworthy. Alpha wannabe keyboard warrior. Just do it with her already. That's what I do. Jeez, I hate this stupid manga and the MC, but I will keep coming back anyway. And then there's I am tougher than you millennials and I've worked 100 times harder under worse conditions crowd. Story 30. Screaming Bible verses at you like you're a demon that'll apparently be converted into their specific branch of their specific faith, because that specific quote from a mistranslated series of quotes written by lecherous hogs is the answer to every question life has to give. In reality, it only makes them look desperate and brainless. Same goes for when they ask stupid questions because of what they read in said book. I once had an evangelist walk up to my door and ask what I'll do when I'm at my lowest in life. When I said that I'll go to my family and friends, they looked at me with this incredulous expression as though that was the last thing they'd expected to hear. They even had the gall to tell me to my face that my family and friends won't stand by me, before then quoting something from their tablet, not even bothering to bring their book about how Jesus will always accept me and my numerous sins. I just slammed the door in their face at that point. I've had numerous other experiences with cross-knockers, but this one stands out the most for me. Story 31. Speak a language they know nothing about or assume people don't speak their language. I live in France but go to an international school where we speak English and it has the English curriculum and stuff. So of course, all my friends are either English or come from an English-speaking country or they learned English here. I go to football, European, with a school friend, so naturally we speak English when we swear or talk about memes. They always copy us without any idea of what they're saying. They're still nice guys though. On the topic of people assuming that others don't speak their language, some of my friends were out and talking English to each other, and some French kids heard and started mocking them and swearing at them in French. Now, two of my friends there were French and the other couldn't understand, so they spoke back in French and apparently the French kids went red. Some people in the world are just idiots. Story 32. I had this very annoying older woman I used to work with, and in every conversation, particularly in those that she was presenting stuff to the team, she would use the phrase per se at least once a minute, if not more. She often didn't even use it in the right context. I mentioned it to another woman I worked with and decided to count the number of times she used it in one meeting. She used it 25 times in under 15 minutes during that meeting. It was astounding. There's a lot of Latin phrases you can use. They fit well in a lot of situations that come up. But just because you know one and use it constantly, it does not make you look clever. Story 33. This one is 50-50, but asserting the validity of their statements by proxy. Example, in a discussion about a random hypothetical legal question using "my dad's a lawyer" as proof of evidence or backing to your argument. Counterexample, same discussion. My dad's a lawyer and has mentioned similar scenarios that he's dealt with. That said, I'm not him and could be misremembering the specifics. In effect, the difference is that in the unacceptable case, you are asserting that your statement is true because of something that doesn't necessarily have any bearing on the statement. In the acceptable case, you are asserting you have even slightly applicable vicarious experience with the subject matter at hand, but you are acknowledging that you are not the expert, so your statement could be flawed. My personal method is that I just about always give background information on my information. I'll say a thing and either precede it or follow it with, I read in a science magazine a couple years ago, or, whatever. This is to provide the other person with an indication on just how skeptical they should be about the validity of my statement. I take no offense if my information or stance, which is based on a half-remembered science article I half-heartedly read years back, is considered wrong. Story 34. Smelling the cork upon opening a bottle of wine. You look at the cork to see if it did its job. Red wine will stain the cork to some extent, especially with older bottles, but you don't want to see it all stained all the way through to the end. You smell the wine to see how it held up. If it smells like wet newsprint or cardboard, your bottle is probably corked. This actually refers to the presence of a particular fungi in the cork and is not visible. Any decent wine store will exchange this for you and will return it to their distributor for a refund. Story 35. They use big words like photosynthesis and sodium chloride. Not even medical doctors use the technical terms for a disease when telling somebody they have it. You never hear a doctor say you have the human immunodeficiency virus. They say you have HIV. You remember that one scene from Jimmy Neutron where he said sodium chloride and his manager said it was salt, but Jimmy was trying to make himself sound smart? Well, there is a meme on YouTube where the manager just destroys Jimmy with straight facts. Also, when they make things unnecessarily complicated, it's just annoying. Stop. They will also make fun of others for not knowing things, not ignorant people being made fun of, people who are trying their hardest to learn being made fun of. Those people can get off, and 90% of the time, they're getting laughed at because they asked some stupid question. I have a story when somebody made fun of someone for not knowing what the Gallipoli campaign was, but that somebody didn't know anything about history after claiming they were a history of God. And the worst part is he got 99% of the questions incorrect, and some of those questions we learned in class like 5 seconds ago. Story 36. I used to think I needed to look smart all the time. Now I've met my kid and she's so open and honest and way smarter than me. I've learned that you look much brighter when you admit you don't know and ask for help. Except when my daughter, 15, announced today on a street in the Loop, "Mom, you are a really great liar. You told me that guy, trying to sell his hot mixtape, that you don't have any cash. You have heaps of cash." That aside, saying, "This isn't my area of expertise. I don't even know what I don't know," is the smartest thing ever. It's endearing and it makes people appreciate their opportunity to educate you. Story 37. Name logical fallacies during an argument and pretend that ends the discussion. Like, yes, if I commit a fallacy, I've made a mistake, but A, that doesn't mean that I'm wrong, and 2, that doesn't make you right. It just means that one particular part of my argument has a problem, not that you've knocked down the entire theory. Second, most people don't know what these fallacies actually mean, like the appeal to authority doesn't really apply when someone you refer to has expertise in that field. A lawyer is, by definition, an expert on law. If I'm quoting an expert on a particular field of law about a law that is in that field, then that's not really a fallacy. He's an expert because he's actually studied the subject. An immunologist is an expert on the immune system. He knows how medicine works. It's not a fallacy to refer to an immunologist in a discussion of medicines. Story 38. Saying you don't watch sports ball. Gamers tend to be the biggest offenders and are doing what they hate when done to them, ripping on something that the other person enjoys, and that the person making fun of it most likely has little knowledge about it. They all have something unique, challenging, and interesting to get into if you take the time, and someone who is enthusiastic will bring that energy and probably reel you in a bit if you got off your high horse. I'm an embarrassingly avid gamer, D&D player, and I love football to the point where I'm sick of football getting auto-corrected to diurnal. Broaden your horizons. Story 39. Watching a few YouTube videos or spending 5 minutes on Google, then pretending to be an expert. I had an ex-roommate that did this all the time. He was a super narcissistic piece of trash that would do the above sentence constantly. My favorite, by far, was when he decided he wanted to be the car guy of the group. He had driven 4 hours away to Des Moines, Iowa, and spent $3,000 on this piece of trash Jeep that was falling apart because he thought it would make him more cool. Also, a buddy of his had just bought a Jeep and he's never had an original thought in his life. So he sold me his 2005 Ford Focus for only $700. Wasn't a bad car, it ran decently and had pretty good gas mileage. The weekend after he bought the Jeep back, the brakes gave out. He had to spend all his money fixing that and getting new oil, and it needed new tires and a ton more. At least a few $1,000s more that he didn't do. The day after he got back, I was cleaning my car. This guy was a total slob, and he decided he wanted to test his new Google knowledge. He came over and told me to pop the hood, so bored out of my mind and finally done scrubbing the layers of dirt and God knows what else off of the dash, I released the latch. He walked over and immediately just started yanking on the hood. Damn thing must be jammed somehow, and he just kept pulling. I let him do this for about 10 minutes before I reached under and undid the second latch. It was then I knew this was going to be hilarious. I spent the entire time trying to hold back laughter, while my other roommate thought he actually knew what he was talking about. First thing he said after finally seeing underneath was, "Wow, this looks totally different than my Jeep." No kidding. He couldn't figure out how to prop the hood up, so he had to hold it. No way I was going to help him again. Apparently, he thought my 4-cylinder was a 6-cylinder, even though there were, of course, only 4 cylinders. He pointed to the windshield wiper fluid and said, "I think this is your coolant. We can top it off if you want." When he found the correct place to pour coolant but didn't realize it, there was a label showing a yellow liquid with a check mark and an orange liquid with an X over it. This just means don't put in dirty coolant. He read it as no orange liquids. He decided to check my oil too. He then pulled out the dipstick, said, "Looks good," and put it back in. Then he just kept randomly tugging on things and going, "Yep, trying to look like he was a professional. I think the only thing he got right was identifying the battery, but he got the charges wrong. Story 40. It's probably insert thing I don't understand here. Okay, so you might not know what I'm talking about, but here's what I mean. So one thing people who want to sound smart do all the time is when there's something nobody in a group understands, they'll try to take something they know and the same topic and say, it's probably like that. They know full well that, unless by pure chance it has nothing to do with that, what we're talking about, but they're banking on the idea that you don't know that. And then if somebody Googles it, they'll just cop out and act like they just forgot, hence why they say it's probably like that, not it is that. My little brother is so guilty of this. I remember me and a few others were discussing how we thought an AI worked in a game, and he was like, it's probably purlin noise. Now, I happen to know that he's only heard that word, purlin noise, because of the Game Theorists, one of the channels on there, don't know which, and he clearly doesn't know what it means. I don't understand it great either, but I know it has something to do with AI. It's made to create 3D images and stuff. And I heard so many people do this all throughout school. They'd hear some random word and try to impress you with it, even where it didn't apply. I remember one guy who just Control-Shift-ID'd and was like, dude, I could easily hack into this website. Look at these, they're all void. He clearly didn't know what the hell he was talking about. That sentence is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, and I barely know what void means. I don't even need to know what void means to know that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. He didn't know what the heck he's talking about, but he was banking on the idea that I didn't either. And even though I basically don't know what it means, I have a vague idea. I'm not totally clueless, but I don't quite know. I still knew damn well he was full of crap. To anyone doing this, no, we're not falling for it. Nobody is falling for it. Your name dropping something I don't know won't work. Here are some other ones. If you don't know what the Fibonacci sequence is for, which I don't, artichokes or something, screw that. Don't name drop it like it means something. Another thing my little brother liked to do. You're not impressing anyone. 11-year-old me liked to talk about plasma like I knew what it was, even though a year later I realized I was stupid. If you don't know what something means, don't pretend you do. Don't do this, oh, they won't know, or, oh, it's close enough I can play it off. We can tell. And if you like these stories and can relate to at least one of them, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.